A very special guest tonight, and instead of listening to me like you normally do, or maybe you don't listen to me, instead of listening to me, Jonathan Roiz is going to come up and speak, share some of his life, share some of what he does in Guatemala, and he's going to talk about that and share some of his ministry with us. So, without further ado, I'd like for you to show your appreciation for Jonathan Roiz.
As you know, my name is Jonathan Roiz. I'm 32 years old. My life has been complex, growing up in a world so cold. Grew up in a Christian family, church every Sunday, youth group every Wednesday. Spending my life serving God was and is my destiny. I saw the beauty of the church and the good it can do. I witnessed the pain it can cause when selfishness fails to see the heart of those living in hopelessness, and with their words and actions hurt the very ones the church is meant to save. As a young boy, I was sensitive to the pain around me and felt the world on my shoulders. A heavy burden for a child to bear. But I was unaware that it was part of the process of purpose, preparing me for the plan that God had destined for my life. I began writing music to express my feelings deep inside. For the pen was often the only one who was listening. But I am not the author of my songs, God is. I'm nothing more than the pen. For the music is a reflection of the deep passion within. As a child, I involved myself in local missions, reaching out to the homeless and brokenhearted. You're never too young to get started. At 15 years old, I traveled to Mexico as a missionary, followed by a mission trip to Escuintla, Guatemala, during the Civil War, the place where I embraced my purpose. While in Guatemala, I witnessed misery in its purest form. Children living in the streets, women being beaten, families starving for lack of food to eat. Moved by what I saw, I stood in the street in awe and felt God's presence and heard my call. See, now that I have seen the children and held them in my arms, I made it my mission to keep them safe from harm. For I was a child when I saw a child that longed for a reason to smile. Hungry, no shoes, body bruised from years of abuse. I remember the children look into my eyes. The thought of them makes me cry. And in that moment, I could see my destiny calling me. In the words of, I returned to the United States and uttered the words to my parents, I will never be the same again. And in the words of my father, and he never was. I showed my great-grandmother, who was from Nicaragua, pictures of the children from Guatemala. She began to weep, for she saw herself in them, and spoke the words I have never forgotten. Don't forget them, they need you. Years passed, life happened, and I lost communication with my friends in Guatemala. Betty Wright, an inspirational woman who took me to Guatemala, passed away from cancer 3 years later. And for over 10 years, I sent letters to Guatemala with no answer. Years passed and I could not get past the thought of the children. Every day in my thoughts and dreams, I heard their voices crying out, somebody help me. Tell them don't beat me. Somebody love me and show me the way. I don't want to continue living this way. Every night I would toss and turn thinking about this call. I felt their pain as if it was happening to me. I heard their cries as if they were with me. But God was preparing me for a great responsibility. Life struggles happened, went on a journey on my own. Financial difficulties happened and I lost everything I owned. Ended up living in a car, feeling all alone. Asking God, why is this happening? And his answer was this, it's the process of purpose. Just wait and see, one day you'll understand. I'm preparing you for a great responsibility. In 2002, my family divorced. Mother went away and was devastated by the loss. For all I ever wanted was a happy home. Now an only child all alone. No one saw my moments of loneliness, never reached out to me. Where were my friends and family in my moment of need? Asked God, why is this happening? And his answer was, this is the process of purpose. Just wait and see, one day you'll understand. I'm preparing you for a great responsibility. I would ask over and over again, why would all this happen to someone who all my life only wanted to help others, serve God, and change the world? Through these difficult times, I found that God was allowing me to taste the realities of what it feels like to be poor, to suffer, to be abandoned, to love and to lose, to be alone, to understand how the people around the world feel, forming a messenger, a voice of the voiceless, and thought through these moments, beautiful songs were birthed and a vision of what is needed to transform the world. The world needs a hope movement. 10 years after leaving Guatemala, I wrote Pastor Nettie, who is now the director of the Hope Movement in Guatemala, one last letter. 2 weeks later, I received a response. And Pastor Nettie said, I remember this young boy who is now a man, and for 10 years, we waited for you. And now we have reconnected, and we will work together to fulfill the vision of God. They had to close the feeding center I once worked in as a child because of lack of funds. So I founded the Hope Movement, and from that moment, doors began to open to ignite the Hope Movement in many nations. No formal training to design a website and no one to help me. So I taught myself, and now 300,000 people visit the website monthly. We are educating over 200 children in the Amazons of Iquitos, Peru, with opportunities to ignite a hope movement in Haiti, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Mexico, and Belize, developing a generation of transformation initiative to raise up a new generation of young people in Pakistan, where only 1% of the population know Jesus. In the same place where I was inspired at the age of 15 in Escuintla, Guatemala, to bring a change, we are building a new center called the Haven of Hope. People from all over the world, such as Kenya, Africa, India, and the Philippines, reach out to us saying, we need a hope movement of united people to transform our nation. For the vision is to unite God's people as one to bring a real transformation to the nation, stabilize the family structure, to break the cycle of poverty and abuse, and raise up a generation of transformation. See, you may think you're too young to worry about the problems of the world. If I could do this at 15 years old, you can as well. There is no excuse. Many times I could have given up when no one helped me. I had no money, no connections, and when no one saw the vision and no one shared the passion. When you understand your great responsibility, you cannot turn your back on destiny. For you are the generation who will either continue the cycle of hopelessness, or you'll be the generation of transformation, breaking the cycle, transforming nations into havens of hope. But the decision is yours. Now what will you do? For the day has arrived for a change in this generation. God is tired, and it's time for a hard decision. Before we can change the world, we have to change ourselves. We treat youth group and church as a social club, a comfort zone, trapped by the four walls, blinded by the injustice around us. Over 80% of the youth I grew up with in church no longer serve God. In fact, many of them are atheists. I often ask God, why? And the conclusion is that their experience was religion, not relationship. True relationship cannot turn its back on the lover of their soul. True relationship feels incomplete without God, for it is He who makes them whole. We only seek God when we need something from His hand, and we never take time to seek His face. Using His grace, causing tears to flow down His face, we say to God, I love you and I will serve you, but only if you give me something in return. Relationship with God has another definition. A relationship is when you serve without condition. We twist the definition to justify our actions. Our actions generations of infidelity and hypocrisy separate us from our destiny. If I'm speaking to you or someone you know, if you know this is true, now what will you do? For it's time to change, for God is calling you. In the evening, God illuminates the heavens with the stars like diamonds in the sky to show you that He is with you, but you ignore Him. You feel you have better things to do. In your moments of despair, you cry when no one else is around. God caresses your face to dry your eyes and speaks to you in a still small voice, but you never heard a sound. Your lack of conversation caused separation. You never felt His presence. How will you ever change the nations if your lack of connection with the source of your salvation? In the mornings, God tries to speak to you, but you tell Him, I have better things to do. You spend your life empty, filling your hole of your soul with the poison of the world, a generation consumed with reality television, which is anything but reality, dividing them farther from their destiny. A generation that worships rock stars rather than the one who created the stars. A generation whose philosophy is that it's better to receive than give, while the world around them drown in hopelessness. A generation of Christians who are all talk, no action, faith without works. A generation of Christians that prefer playing than praying. With every act of sin, we penetrate the nails again and again through His hands, causing extreme pain in the one who gave us love. The day has arrived for change in this generation. God is tired, and it's time for a hard decision. God is waiting for you with arms open wide. Today, God has a message for you. Run to my arms, look into my eyes, and see all that I see in you. See, oftentimes, the other cause of a generation to separate itself from God is because of man-made hurt they witnessed within the church. I walked into a restaurant one day. Near the entrance was a bar. An old friend from church saw me, and he called me over to him. I had not seen him in years, and this young man once ministered in the church. He witnessed abuse in the church, filling his eyes with tears. In this bar, he drank a shot of liquor and said, "This is for the church," as he fell off his bar stool. "This is for the church that let me down." Months later, he was arrested for attempted murder. This young man went from ministering in the church to being hurt by the church to a prisoner for life. The world has seen hypocrisy in the church. People that don't practice what they preach. See, you will face adversity, for the enemy wants to rob you of your destiny. People will hurt you. Christians, people who say that Christians will cause you pain. But be strong. For if you have a true relationship with God, you will not be able to turn away no matter what anyone may say. You may ask why the church is not perfect, and why do people say the things that they say and do the things they do. God's answer is this: I will never let you down. Just wait and see. One day you'll understand. I'm preparing you for a great responsibility. This is the formation of a generation of transformation, a hope movement of united youth ready to answer the call of God. See, many youth fall, for if you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. And life without purpose is a life that is vulnerable to temptation, causing disconnection from salvation. We live in a day and age where over 100 million children live on the streets, fatherless, motherless, hopeless, the result of selfishness, longing for a loving caress, drowning in the abyss of society's lack of knowledge that I exist. Imagine if that was you. They need you. God is calling you. Now what will you do? slavery now than in history. Over 12 million around the world. In the U.S. alone, 50,000 men, women, and children are trafficked annually. They abide where you reside, but you never heard their cry. Imagine if that was you. They need you. God is calling you now. What will you do? Over 60% of families end in divorce, creating a cycle of dysfunction, psychological contamination fed into the bloodstream from generation to generation, family disintegration, the definition of family in a state of disintegration. Imagine if that was you. They need you. God is calling you. Now what will you do? 2.8 billion impoverished souls in impoverished conditions, living on less than $1 a day. Drug addiction, suffering from hope, malnutrition. How much did you eat today? By the end of this day, over 30,000 people will pass away from hunger. How much food did you throw away? Imagine if that was you. They need you. God is calling you. Now what will you do? For walls blind the church, we remain in the comfort zone of our seats while the children are crying out, help me, I'm tired of being beat. Titles for the leaders to make them more than what they are. Religious superstars driving around their Bentley on the church dollar. Fancy church buildings worth millions of dollars while spiritual genocide lead millions to slaughter. Religiosity mixed with hypocrisy, denominational barriers, lack of unity. Young people who are part of groups of terror will strap on a bomb to their body and will die for their cause. Young people, yet we won't reach out to those who are on the other side of our four walls, but the hope movement is here to cause those walls to fall. In James 1:27 it says that religion that our God, our Father, accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after the orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself being polluted from the world. Billions around the world don't know the hope of Jesus. Many around you in your school and your community are longing for hope. What have you done to reach them? Social outreach goes hand in hand with spiritual evangelism. In James 2:14 through 17 it says, what good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or a sister who is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well. In other words, God bless you, brother. Keep warm and be well fed, but does nothing to meet his physical needs. What good is it? In the same way, faith is by itself. It cannot accomplish. In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. See, we have twisted the definition of ministry. The Webster's Dictionary defines the word ministry as an act of serving. The Hope Movement is not my ministry, it's our ministry. This is not your church, this is our church. We are the church. Imagine thousands of youth from different churches united, going into the schools to counsel and educate, preach, bringing hope to thousands of youth. This is the vision of God. A drop, an act of love that falls into a body of water, your family, your school, and your community. Creates a ripple. When many drops fall, it creates a ripple effect. When the ripples unite, it forms a flood. Your act of love, united with other acts of love, will form a flood of hope. You may say, I'm too young. But you would be wrong. God is calling you to take action now. For in 1 Samuel 3, it speaks of a story of a young man by the name of Samuel, who was just like you, who became a leader. The Bible says that this young boy named Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak, he could not barely see, and lying down in his usual place, the lamp of God had not gone out. And Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark was. This evening the Lord called Samuel, a young boy, just like you. Samuel answered, here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, here I am, you called me? But Eli said, I didn't call you, go back and lie down. So he went down and laid back down. And again the Lord called, saying, Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, you called me? Here I am. My son, Eli said, I did not call you. Now go back and lie down. Now at this time Samuel did not know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel a third time, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, here I am, you called me? And Eli realized that the Lord was calling him. So Eli told Samuel, go lie down. And if he calls you, say, speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. So Samuel went and laid down in his place, and the Lord came and stood there. Calling him, just as he did before, he said, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant is listening. And the Lord said to Samuel, this young boy, see, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears tingle. God is trying to speak to this generation. He wants to share his vision for your life. A vision that will make the world tremble in awe, causing the walls of the church to fall, creating a flood of hope flowing through the streets like a mighty river. How many of you are ready to stand up to help your generation? See, you're comfortable right now on your couches, but right now, a child is living in the streets on a piece of metal. Imagine if that was you. So I ask of you, if you're ready to stand up, you can come up here and say, look, I'm ready to make a stand. I'm ready to make a stand and say, God, use me for your glory. Or you can stay seated. It's up to you. Because the fact is, if you can't help the people, if you can't stand up here in your four walls of your church, if you can't help your people right next to you, how are you going to help people in your school? And right now in your school, your friends go home every night and you don't know what's happening in their home. They might be thinking about suicide. They may be being abused by their parents. They may just be sad. Or they might just not know Jesus, and that's bad enough. What have you done? So after I leave here, I hope that you will carry on and that these words will be penetrating in your mind and your heart and will stay with you. I want these images to stay in your mind because you're never too young to save the world. You have no excuse. From this day forward, you cannot leave here and say, nobody told me. Now you know. Now what will you do with it?
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Jonathan's message tonight, Lord. Help us to be aware and to be mindful of those around us who are less fortunate than ourselves. Help us, Lord, to have a heart that would be after what you would desire. To be after what James talks about, Lord, for the orphans.